Hi everyone! Thanks again for joining us at San Francisco Indie Fest 2026. And my name is Lucy Hanna. I'm one of the programmers here, and I'm so glad that today I am presenting one of the very unique films we have this year. It's a film that speaks of the past, yet it's very applicable in the future. It's a film from Spain, but the story and the history in this film and the morale is applicable across the globe. The film is The Invasion of the Barbarians. I'm gladly interviewing Vicente Monsonis. I want to make sure that the name is right. This is how the name is in his hometown, and then I insist to call him by his real name. Welcome to our festival. Thank you for joining me. I'm so glad that we are going to talk about your film. Like I said, it's a very hard piece. It's definitely a risk to make a film these days that is speaking of the past. It's not like the usual story that will attract people. Like, for instance, it's a choice that you made to speak about a real story inspired by true events, um, and to give voice to something that did not get the attention it should. There are certain stories that were overtold, but there are also other stories that were never told, and this is one of the stories. It highlights a very specific time in history where the entire world almost looks like how it looks right now. Everything is on fire. Uh, the film let me start and say that I was very inspired by this story and film and the storytelling that you did in it. How did you think about making this film in this climate, in this demanding cinema industry where everyone wants the entertainment and the fun and like the big box offices? You still decided to make a film that is very hard to make because you're recreating spaces that do not exist anymore, and you're telling a story that is very sensitive and very hard actually to execute. And it has very strong messages to so many people. When we continue in the discussion, we're going to go over those messages. How did you think about this? Why did you make this film?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me here. I'm very honored and glad to be part of your festival. Uh, I have to tell you that I lived for 1 year when I was young, when I was 16 in California, near San Francisco. And San Francisco is by far my favorite city in the United States. I wish I had the chance to visit you, but now are difficult times, difficult
Definitely.
times to travel for traveling to the United States, and mostly for people like me,
Are you on one of
who
the
are.
lists? You're
I'm
not.
I'm pretty sure I'll be. I mean, if they check out my social media, they won't let me out of from Spain, from
Oh
my
my God.
hometown. Well,
Oh.
actually, when this film, The Invasion of the Barbarians, is based on a theater play by a very good friend of mine, Chema Cardeña, who's a playwright in Valencia, my hometown. We've worked together many times, and he's very concerned also with the memory and he in his plays he always talks about history and watching or looking at history from behind. Usually the winners, I mean the people who win the wars, they are the ones who write history, but and they write history according to their own
Point of view.
necessities, to their will, right? And most of the time, the real history is the history of those who lost. And in our case, we have this very traumatic part of our history, which is the war in Spain. People used to call it, or most people call it, civil war, our own civil war between 1936 and 1939. Uh, I don't call it civil war because that's our war was not actually a war uh, between two fractions of the Spanish people, but a war against from between the Spanish people and the fascists. Uh, we always say that fascism just won one war in history, which was the Spanish War. Uh, Franco, which was the fascist in Spain, won the war, and Hitler and Mussolini, who were his allies, they lost. So Spain was the only country in Europe where fascism won the war. And after the winning, during the years when the Second World War was still on, Franco did a terrible repression on those who he believed were his enemies. I mean, all those people who had been defending the democracy, the legality of the republic, the democratic regime, which was before fascism. I don't know if you know that Spain is the second country in the world after Cambodia with more disappeared and killed by a dictatorial regime after the war. And many people are still looking for the remains of their families. I mean, from those members of their family who were killed at that time. They were not killed because they took part in the war or they had any crimes uh, to be blamed from, but they were killed just because they were people who supported democracy in the time in which fascism won the war, after the war. So when my friend Chema Cardeña wrote this play, and when they released the play and the theater, the play is obviously much more simple than the film.
Limited. Mhm.
Yeah, more limited. It's just two conversations. Is the in one time in 1939 there is this interrogatory to Esperanza, which is the woman who's trying to save the pictures from the Museo del Prado, from the
Mhm.
Prado Museum, and another conversation nowadays between this woman who tries to find the remains of Esperanza in a mass grave, right?
Mhm.
And there are just four characters in the play,
Mhm.
and Chema uses real things of the history, which are like that they brought all the paintings from Del Prado to Valencia, and some of them remained in Valencia during the war because they wanted to keep them away from the fascist bombs, which
Mhm.
were falling or they were dropping in Madrid, and also the painting, which is the core at the core of the film, which is one of the elements, which the film turns around. It's called The Invasion of the Barbarians. That's a real painting, and it disappeared just as we tell in the film. It disappeared during the war. So when I watched the film, the play, uh, it made me remember all the stories that my grandparents told me about the Republic, the war, and post-war in Valencia, and all the repression, and all the violence, and the hunger, and mainly the how scared they lived. How do you call it? I mean, they were terrorized by
Terrified.
the new
Yeah.
regime.
Yeah, they were abducted by their own people.
Yeah, they needed there was this generation who survived the war and who had been progressist people. They had tried to make a most modern and democratic and liberal Spain before the war, during the Republic. Uh, Everything finished after the war because the fascism took over,
Mhm.
and the repression was terrible. And all these people who had been enforcing or defending democracy, they had to shut up. They had to be quiet. They couldn't express themselves because they were really scared to be taken prisoners, to be uh, disappeared, as many people, more than 150,000 people disappeared, were killed by the fascist regime after the war, once the war was over. So, and many people in Spain had to flee, had to run away from to France, to northern uh, Africa and South America. So the generation of my grandparents were a generation who had lived for more than 40 years under the how do you
Fascism.
say it? Yeah, but completely scared
Yeah,
of the
they were
government.
terrorized, oppressed, and silenced, and
Yeah.
it's either this or the other
So,
route. Yeah.
and this is a part of history in Spain which has not been talked about because the fascism never talked about this. I mean, they made up their own history, a history of victory, and they painted the past as if it was like, they had um, overcome communism, which was a complete lie, and they brought to Spain progress and prosperity, and that's another big lie because Spain was a very poor country until it reached democracy, and it joined actually the European Union, and we are still. Behind another
Other
neighbor
countries.
countries like France or Italy, and during the Republic we were just at the same level, right? So the fascists made up their history,
Mhm.
and this part of the post-war, the repression, is a part of our history that people don't talk about usually, and to me it was like a necessity to explain all those stories that my grandparents told me about how they lived the immediate time after the war, and relate that to all those people who nowadays are still looking for the remains of their relatives,
Mhm.
and trying to get back their memory and their dignity, right? So that's
Definitely,
why.
definitely, that's a very honorable message that you're carrying through your art, and I really appreciate you taking the risk and making this film. Like you said, history is not necessarily written in a fair manner. When you win, you write the history your own way, and when you start applying your own narrative, or you start judging people or deciding who is correct and who is not, it's not because you are morally better, but it's just because you're in power, you're in a position of power, you won. And I think
Right.
many films this year have actually discussed this idea, and I really appreciate that your film is telling a completely different story that just loops back to what we're living here. We see almost in our time across the globe, oppression still exists, new fascism and of some sort. Once you're in power, your narrative is the one that needs to be applied, and anybody that says anything else, he's a liar, he's a traitor, is whatever. I think the best thing to understand what humans would do, or to predict it, is by looking at what human already did, and
Right.
you can just tell what's gonna happen. Which takes
Mhm.
me to how you decided to open the film. The film opened in a heart-wrecking scene, and a father and a daughter and a bunch of people put in a moral question, one very hard moral question, which I think also your film was filled with symbolism, like the invasion of barbarians was not an actual picture or like a piece of art that disappeared. um, I think it was more of you're trying to preserve something and you're fighting for a group set of ideas and beliefs and standards, and someone is trying to steal it from you for the sake of their own entertainment. I think that there was a symbolism of this film. It wasn't just about this painting that disappeared or those people trying to protect the painting. It's just protecting your history and who you are versus what is being dictated on you, and you have
Hmm.
to go by it or else, which we see it everywhere. I mean, this conversation has to go and take like a political line for it, but still we want to keep it artistic as much as possible. But
Right, right.
I mean, we see it happening in so many countries, and people are rising. um so you
Well,
started.
actually,
Mhm,
let me tell you that this the title and the painting, the invasion of the barbarians, that's very happy founding. I don't know if that's a word by Tema, the playwright.
mhm,
Because as I told you before, this picture existed really. I mean, it was a real picture,
yeah.
and it disappeared during the war. But the title, The Invasion of the Barbarians, which is La Invasión de los Bárbaros in
Mhm,
Spanish, it's a perfect metaphor of what was the victory of fascism in Spain,
mhm,
but also what is going on right now all over the world, also in Spain, no? Which is the raising of the uh, intolerance and all these extreme right ideas of authoritarianism, right?
yeah.
And it works very well as the title of the film because it's not just the title, but it's also a warning
It's a
for
metaphor
the
for what's
audiences. Yeah, it's
happening.
a metaphor. It's a
You can
complete
use
metaphor.
it, like I told you earlier. I've been using it on a daily basis to express a lot of things.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
let's get back to how you opened the film with that moral questioning. Why was it important for you to begin the film in a place of a complete moral helplessness? Um, and you wrapped it up at the end. Like it
Hmm.
was very well edited at the beginning, the middle, and you were giving me pieces of what's happening. But you started the film with this moral questioning, as if you were trying to tell people something. What were you trying to say? What was your message?
Well, actually, what I wanted is I wanted to catch the audience's attention.
Hmm.
I mean, opening all these questions. Um, Let me go back to the play. As I told you, the theater play is just these two conversations, which we come back to during the film in 1939, the interrogation in 1939, and with the mayor nowadays. And in the play, these conversations are completely chronological. I mean,
Hmm.
they evolve in time from the beginning to the end, right? And besides this conversation, I wanted to add the historical atmosphere, the landscape, the context to these conversations. That's why I put all these other stories, other characters, in order to explain what's around them, no? But when in the first draft of the script, I made the chronology a natural chronology in time and from the beginning to the end. It didn't work for me. So I understand because what I wanted with this film, I wanted to move the audience. I wanted to reach the audience, not just tell them story, not just let them know what happened in Spain and what's going on nowadays, because as I told you, everything is very documented and everything is based or inspired in real events, but I wanted to make the audience take part,
Mhm.
take a position,
Think
move.
about it. Like, oh, are you
Yeah,
gonna shoot her?
not just
What's gonna
think, but
happen?
yeah. In Spain, we in the word that we use is conmover. Conmover means that you move
Mhm.
with something makes you move, right? And move emotionally.
Emotionally.
And when I saw this first chronology that I did of the script, and it didn't work because it was like very documentary. It was very, it explained the things, but without the emotional energy that I was looking for. I had the idea to change the chronology in the past,
Mm.
because the past is the part of the film which is more important because it's telling you what happened, uh, and the consequences, you see them in the present. And so I made a new chronology for the past, and this chronology was an emotional chronology. If you watch the film carefully, you'll see that all the events that I'm depicting in 1939 are absolutely jumping from back
Back
and
and forth.
forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are not telling you what happens from the beginning to the end, but they tell you everything, but the same way as when some friend tells you a story and he keeps the interest, they don't tell you the interesting things, or they don't tell you the important things till the end.
Hmm.
So they keep your interest on what's going on.
Keep
So
your
I
focus.
made an emotional chronology of the past
Mhm.
and a timely chronology of the present, and
Mhm.
that worked very well. And inside this chronology, there's something that I like also, and I try to make on my stories, which is that I like to come back, make circular stories,
Mhm.
to come back to the beginning,
Tie it up.
and
Yeah. Tie it
yeah,
up
and
in
tie the beginning and the end.
the
And
beginning and the end. Tie up in like the like
so
as if you
this,
have two brackets. The film between brackets.
right.
Yeah.
So this beginning is opening. It's an opening that I think leaves you some questions, some interesting questions, which pushes you through the film until the end when you get all the answers. And that's why I chose to start the film by this image, by this sequence, because you know that something hard is going to happen there, but you don't get to find out until the end,
The very
right?
end. Um, which definitely you will be fulfilled at the end. You will get to understand the story, and then I liked how you arranged it and edited it, and but you definitely kept me on your feet whether you had this on, but I was on my feet the entire time. Um, you touched on to a very risky thing to talk about, the church, the nuns. And I think I get the message that you're trying to say. It's the use of religion in a political manner that, unfortunately, during that time, religion has all, and nowadays, religion has always been used as a tool to try and control the masses by the politicians. I'm not talking about religion in terms of faith. That's a different story. But I think the symbolism of the nuns not having any empathy towards Esperanza, not like hiding the letter. I personally expected that the one that would want to give the letter would be the nun, not the actual interrogating officer. That officer that is part of this vicious system um, was the one that had restrained respect for Esperanza, and he wanted to help her and he empathized with her, even though he was her executor in some manner. And the ones that were actually part of the unfairness, let me say that, were the nuns. And
Mhm.
why did you do that? Why? I don't know.
Well, it's very simple. The answer is very simple. I just was mm, how do you say that? Uh, I did it. I just explained reality as it was. I mean, in Spain, one of the biggest allies of fascism in the war in Spain was the church, was the Catholic Church. And that's because the church in Spain had kept many privileges through centuries, and it has been one of the most powerful institutions, still is in Spain, and that has nothing to do probably with religion or faith. Is The church in
The
Spain
institution
has,
as an
yeah,
institution.
has
Yeah.
become a huge, very, very powerful institution. It's probably the biggest landowner and buildings owner in Spain. It has it has a lot of power, and the republic, the democratic government right before the war, one of the things that wanted to do is to establish a non-religious state,
Mm.
because Spain had always had the Catholicism as the official religion of the state. And for the first time ever in the during the Spanish República, they tried to have a state with no religion and separate completely religion from state, right? And the church was not
Was
happy with
fighting
that.
back. Yeah,
Yeah,
they were
they
fighting
fought,
to keep their space by
and
actually
and
becoming allies to the
and
system that would
after,
let them do
yes,
that.
and after the war, let me tell you, many monasteries and many churches and many religious places became prisons for the Republicans. And that's why the nuns are actually the nuns of one convent in Valencia, which is the Convento de Santa Clara, which was one of the prisons where the democratic women, the women defending Republica, were imprisoned. And those who watch after or watch out for well, watch the prisoners were the nuns.
Yeah.
So what I'm telling in the film, which I understand that for people who are not Spanish or don't know as much about our history, uh, it might seem shocking, right? But that's the reality. It's the pure reality. During the war in Spain, many priests, many Catholic priests, took their arms and they also fought, and then they killed people. And that's a reality, and there's a lot of documentation about that.
Well, definitely, it's a shocking reality to me personally. I could understand the metaphor, and like I said, religion has always been used by politicians to as a means of control or attraction of the masses. And then once they get on the chairs, you get to see the truth behind it. Well, what exactly do they have to offer, or if they care about religion at all? Um, Let's talk about the execution of the film, since you are also the producer. But planning such a historic, like you're remaking history. How did you? What was your budget? How did you manage with this budget to recreate history the way you did? The costumes, the props, the decor, the locations. I can see that you definitely use real locations. You were lucky. It's always,
Mhm.
I think a filmmaker is lucky when they get to use real life and they don't have to
Right.
create it. But also there were parts that you completely had to build. If you want to tell me more about that, um,
Well, this film is made in Valencian language, which is Catalan. I don't know if you are aware that in Spain, besides Spanish, we have other different official languages in some parts of Spain. In Valencia, where I live, uh, there's also Catalan, which is an official language. And Catalan is our mother language. It's the language that we've spoken here since the 13th century. Spanish, which we don't call Spanish, we call it Castilian, which is the language which comes from the center of Spain, from Castilla. Uh, it's been an imposition by force since the 1700s. And even though they tried to impose the Castilian from the time that the Bourbon kings came to Spain, they tried to make Castilian the only official language because they were and they are kings from they came from France, and France is very centralized state, and they tried to make the same in Spain, but they couldn't because our cultural roots were very deep. So these 300 years of trying to impose Castilian as the only language in Spain, mostly through the authoritarian governments, never worked. They couldn't finish, they couldn't end up with our mother tongue, our mother language, which is Catalan, right? So when I do my films, I understand that filmmaking is a very powerful weapon uh, of expression for a culture. And we've been, let me tell you, we've been colonized for more than a century by the American films, by the filmmaking from the United States. And that makes people change their ways of thinking, of viewing reality, of relating to other people, of their affections, their way of their consumerism, right? There's a lot of things that you learn through the moving image. So we need to have our own cinematography, our own cinema, our own filmmaking to express our culture. That's why it was so important for me to make the film in Catalan, first of all, because that was the language that my grandparents
Oh,
spoke,
mhm.
and which was spoken mostly in Valencia at that time, and also to tell our story with our people. Okay.
So you depended on the people. How about the locations? Like, how did
To,
you
to
pick?
me, the locations, everything it's shot in real locations, almost everything, as you said. We've just used green screen in a couple
Ah,
of places,
mm,
and um, and in Spain, a low budget film is considered those films which go from 1,300,000 euros
mm,
to 2,500,000, more or less. That's
mm,
considered a low budget film.
mm.
Actually, if you want to participate in the Ministry of Culture, do you want to get some grants for filmmaking or some help, for production? Your film has to have a budget above 1,300,000.
Mhm.
Well, my film doesn't get to 1 million. We are
Yeah,
a little bit
way below. Yeah,
we are
yeah.
below 1 million. But we managed to do it because I've been working for many years in Valencia. I'm very concerned, as I told you, with filmmaking, with culture. And I've got a team of people who always work with me. We are friends more than just a working team. And as we've been working always hard and confronting, all these institutions who never help us to do our things. We've managed to create
Collaborative effort
say
of
a collaborate.
everyone
Yeah,
put
we,
what
we
they
have
have. Yeah, yeah.
we have many people and associations and cultural people culturally concerned who helped us in many ways, like letting us use their locations,
Mm.
or helping us with the soundtrack.
Mhm.
For instance, the soundtrack, we recorded the soundtrack with the Philharmonic Orchestra of the
Mhm.
university.
Yeah, it was very
Yeah,
very
it's
soundtrack. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's well, actually, we edited a CD. We made a record of the soundtrack because we were very happy with the result, and
Mhm.
I wanted a emotional, big orchestra soundtrack, and of course, I we didn't have the budget to rent these professional filmmaking orchestras, to because there are some orchestras that work just to tape to create to record soundtracks for films. But and it was the very first time that this orchestra, which is made up by college students, uh, is the first time they ever recorded a soundtrack for a film. So they were very happy. They worked very hard and they did a really good job. So this is the kind of help that we had from many people, many institutions, many collectives
Mhm.
who help us to put together all the needs for the film.
That's really amazing. Of course, I can talk about this film for hours. However, I have to ask you one final question. In this film is deeply rooted in Spain. But like I said, it's definitely applicable elsewhere, and it's not a time limited film. It's just we are humans and we keep doing the same mistakes all the time, and we are just looping in the same pattern.
Right.
In one sentence, if you can tell me, what do you hope audiences outside Spain reflect on about their own societies while watching this film?
Well, as I told you, and I think the title is very clear in this. The title uh, works as a warning
Yeah.
for the times that we're living. I've been in sometimes when I shown the film and I had these conversations with the audiences. Uh, I remember some people told me that in my film there are good and bad people, which are like probably too uh, specific, let's say. And I said that, of course, in my film there are very good people and very bad people, because my film is not about conservative and progressive people. My film is about Democrat and fascist people. And I said always that fascism doesn't have a place in our societies. In democracy, everything fits, and we all can have our opinions, and we can discuss, and we can defend our points of view in a democratic manner, and that's okay, and that's perfect. But fascism doesn't let you have your own opinion.
Mhm.
So we have to fight fascism, and my film, as we always say, is tries to be a warning against fascism.
It's a warning
Absolutely.
against racism, and that's definitely a key takeaway from the film. Thank you very much for making this film. Thank you for submitting it to our festival, and I hope everyone enjoys the film. I enjoyed it myself. It's a very emotional film, and definitely it will leave you with something. Thanks again, Vicente, for joining me today, and hope to see you in person one day. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to you. I'm very glad to be part of this festival and very honored. Thanks a lot, and good luck.